I just had to take a break from Facebook. Why? What I'm doing about it, with some pointers that may help you do the same. Hi everyone, I'm Leo Notenboom for askleo.com. And yeah, I'm stepping away from Facebook for at least a month. Coincidentally, maybe, until after the US presidential election is over. As you can imagine, Facebook has been very, very frustrating of late. And it really all got to be too much. Just too much. Too much misinformation, too much anxiety, too much anger, and even among some of my friends, too much finding out that some of them weren't quite as rational as I was hoping they would be. Personally, I had moved on from anxiety, I guess you'd call it, over world affairs to an underlying depression about life in general. So what I decided to do was to remove one of the most prominent pain points in my life, at least, and that was, in fact, Facebook. Now, there's a problem with that. There's a real cost associated with stepping away from Facebook, at least for me. Here's the deal. I love Facebook. I really do. There are a lot of really strong pros to continuing to remain engaged in Facebook. I get a lot of information from Facebook. I get a lot of news from Facebook. But more importantly, I connect with more people via Facebook than I do anywhere else. And I'm almost everywhere else. So it's one of those things where Facebook just is this huge, massive community that, yeah, everybody I know, a lot of the people I care about and the people I want to be connected with, they're on Facebook. They may or may not be on other services, but I know that I can find them on Facebook, and Facebook makes it really, really easy to connect with them. I'm going to miss that for a month, at least. The con, of course, is that Facebook also makes a lot of other things easy, things that we wouldn't necessarily want to be easy. The divisiveness, the anger, the misinformation, the spreading piles and piles of manure is all just too easy there, especially in our currently politically charged atmosphere. It was, as I keep saying, too much. So what I've done is I have stopped looking at my Facebook news feed. In fact, I've actually removed the shortcuts to Facebook that I keep on my desktop. I've removed the shortcut to the Facebook app on my mobile device, and I just am not checking in on Facebook on any regular basis. So what am I doing instead? Well, it's only a partial solution, but I have absolutely some specific solutions for aspects of my engagement with Facebook. When it comes to social media, I tried MeWe. I really did. Unfortunately, it's suffering from the classic chicken and egg problem. Nobody's there. And the people that are there, they're just not interacting. So the fact that somebody might be there, well, it doesn't matter if they're not interacting with MeWe. It's as if they're not there. Just like I am not checking in on MeWe anymore because there's no point. There's not really anything interesting going on there. The people that I would care to interact with either aren't there or they're not active there. I am on Twitter. And I have been investing a little bit more energy into posting things on Twitter. I've always posted things on the Ask Leo Twitter account. Those things are automated for the most part, and I'm trying to do a better job of actually responding to everybody that might leave me a message or comment or a reply on Twitter. I have a personal Twitter account that I'm trying to dabble a little bit more with, trying to interact with a little bit more. It's difficult because it's a different experience than Facebook, but it is one of those things where, once again, I'm getting a little bit more information. I'm getting a little bit more up-to-date status and information from some of my social contacts via Twitter. Not all of them, but there are enough there to make it worth engaging with. One of the problems with Twitter is that it's even more ephemeral than Facebook. By that I mean, every so often I run into something on Facebook that I try and find later, and it's fairly difficult to do because it's already scrolled off the timeline. Twitter's worse. Yes, it's got search. They both have search, and typically you can find things. But both of them are social media outlets that really optimize for, well, for lack of a better term, doom scrolling. And it is, in fact, very easy to still find yourself on Twitter just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling to read the latest updates from the various people and sources you're following, for good or for bad. Specifically on Twitter, one of the problems that I've encountered is that many of the people that I would want to follow as individuals, say tech writers or other sources of news and information that actually I would value for Ask Leo and my just sort of tech interests, have slid into politics. They're posting more, way more about politics and social issues, the very stuff that I'm trying to avoid by stepping away from Facebook. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I'm not even saying that those things are unimportant. In fact, they're critically important. I just know that for my own mental health, for my own well-being, I need to not spend as much time and energy looking and consuming that kind of information than they seem to be ready to share that kind of information. I'm on Instagram, but that's not a great news and information source. It is where I go to, however, for my corgi fix. There are a number of corgi celebrities, I'll call them, that I end up looking at on a fairly regular basis that make me smile. That's a good use of social media. Sharing interesting pieces of information, sharing humor, sharing animal pictures, be it cat videos or corgi pictures. That's one of those things that I really get a lot of value out of. And one of the things that I honestly do miss about Facebook, because there is a lot of really good humor, a lot of really good, interesting stuff being shared there. Unfortunately, Facebook's algorithm, among other things, make it almost impossible to separate that wheat from the chaff that is the political mess we all seem to find ourselves in these days. And that actually brings me to one of the reasons that these other social media services, be it Twitter or Instagram or any of the other ones that you might be interested in trying, actually have a little bit more value in times of turmoil. And that is that they're not necessarily forcing an algorithm down your throat. They're not necessarily showing you things that they think you will click on. They're not necessarily showing you things that they think will generate engagement so that you'll see more of their ads or spend more of your time on their service. In the case of Twitter and the case of Instagram, I have them both configured to just show me what these people are posting and show it to me in chronological order. That's it. If you're going to interleave an ad every so often, well, okay. But it's not the mess that is a Facebook feed. Now, one of the things that is, in my mind, critical to sanity on social media is what I call curation. And really all that is something I've alluded to already, and that is picking the right people to follow, the right sources to follow, and unfollowing those that don't add value to your feed, that don't add value to your life. There are a couple of, I'll call them highly respected tech writers whose opinions about technology I truly and deeply respect that I've had to unfollow, simply because they're not adding that value to my feed. So one of the things that I would strongly recommend you do, to the extent that you spend time in social media, is that you spend some energy carefully curating your feed. Get rid of those sources of information that don't add value. If you find that they're making you too angry, if you find that they're simply adding to your anxiety, if you find that they're simply adding to your depression, that's a sign that that is not a source of healthy information for you. And that's where I found myself. I have unfollowed various sources that aren't adding positive value to my life, and I strongly suggest you revisit all of your social sources with exactly that in mind. To quote the article that accompanies this video, my personal rules about remaining social media, mostly Twitter and Instagram, boil down to these two criteria. For business, I follow clear sources of tech information and accounts I want to support. And in turn, I try to post helpful technology information myself and engage with and respond to you, my readers. For my personal side, I follow some friends. I follow some corgi sources and celebrities. And indeed, there are some both celebrities and corgi celebrities that I follow on Instagram specifically. And I follow sources from which I can learn or that entertain me or that otherwise add value, like local news. But that's it. Those are the criteria that I've set up for what I want to consume from my social media accounts. Unfortunately, it's not enough. I'm missing a lot of information out of my social media accounts that I would have been getting out of Facebook. Mostly it boils down to tech news, breaking news, and other information. The good news here is that I do have an alternative. I follow the information published by over 125 different websites every day. And no, that doesn't mean I'm visiting 125 different websites. What it means is I'm quote unquote following 125 different websites in a tool called Feedly. Here's an example of Feedly on your screen. Feedly uses a technology called RSS to fetch and present information from websites. The catch is that the websites have to support RSS. The good news is that many do. For example, they may not even realize it. Any website that publishes using WordPress, which publishes something like a third or more of the websites on the internet, they publish an RSS feed as a side effect of using WordPress. Askleo has an RSS feed that is consumable by tools like Feedly. Feedly is not the only RSS reader, but it is the one that I use, and it is, in my opinion, probably the best alternative to the late, great, and long-lamented Google Reader, which was discontinued some years ago. The idea is you subscribe to specific sites in a tool like Feedly. So, in a case like this, off on the left-hand side, you can see it says follow new sources. It may suggest some sources for you to follow, or you can enter either a website name, or you can actually enter the URL of the website, or if you happen to know the full URL of the RSS feed for a specific website, you can enter that here too. So, for example, if you wanted to follow askleo, you could spell it correctly and type in askleo.com, and you'll see that, in fact, there are two. One is askleo, the askleo.com website, and the other is Confident Computing. You can subscribe to the newsletter not by subscribing an email, but by subscribing to the website in an RSS reader like Feedly. Now, in my case, I've already subscribed to Askleo. So you'll see that it says following here, and we'll show you where that is and what that looks like in a moment. But it also then shows you some related sites that may or may not be interesting to you that all present RSS feeds that you can choose to follow. So what does it mean to follow something? Well, over here in my good news section, I have a collection of websites that I am following currently. You can see that these are sites all focused on what I consider to be quote unquote good or positive news. These are the sources I use for my notallnewsisbad.com daily reminder of basically a piece of good news. Good News Network is a site. Good News, GoodNet is another website. There's nothing here right now. Positive News is another website. You get the idea. These are all individual websites that are publishing articles on a fairly regular basis. And by clicking on their name on the left, I get a list of their most current articles that I haven't necessarily read yet in the pane on the right. I can click on the headline if I'm interested in seeing what it's all about, and I can either, depending on how the website publishes the information, read the article here within Feedly, or I can click on the title and actually go directly to the website that published that information. Typically, what I end up doing is I look at all the headlines, I take a look at the ones that I want to look at, and then once I'm done, I just say, you know what? These are all read, and it moves on to the next. Now, I want to show Uplifting News here as an example of something that isn't necessarily a website. Uplifting News is a subreddit. In other words, it is a specific category within reddit.com dedicated to uplifting news. Every category on Reddit has its own RSS feed, which means that I can consume everything that people are posting on Reddit in this uplifting news category simply by adding it to my RSS reader, Feedly, and looking at it throughout the day. I follow, as I said, 125 different sources, but I've grouped them. This is the Good News group. These are individual bloggers who I happen to follow, this being Seth Godin. There are other sources here that don't currently have individual posts because I caught up with them earlier this morning. These are all the tech news sites I've elected to follow, and you can see that some of them have posted several different articles. In this case, say latest news from ZDNet. Some of them have posted only 2 or 3, like GeekWire currently has only 3 articles that I haven't read yet. There are 415 articles in the tech news category that I haven't read yet. I can look at them all, scroll through them all, and mark them all as unread, or I can work through them one source at a time. Again, this is my choice. I'm not at the whim of some algorithm. I'm looking at the sources I choose to care about, and if I no longer care about a particular source, I can simply remove it from my Feedly. Now, I've got these organized in a specific order, and I do that on purpose. This is a prioritized order. I look at good news first, because that too is part of not only publishing Not All News is Bad, but it's part of my own mental health. I want the good news first. Then I focus on those individuals that I follow. Then I focus on news in the tech industry. Then I focus on news from specific tech companies. I have tech support here. These are sites like askleo, and I take a look at what kinds of things they're talking about. I look at electric. I happen to drive an electric car, so I take a look at various sources of electric-related news. I do follow all of my own feeds just to make sure that they're working properly. I am an amateur photographer, and I follow several sources of interesting information about photography. I follow a number of things for fun. These are sites that post fairly regularly. One of the ones that I think that people would probably relate to the most is XKCD. I don't currently have anything. He publishes about once a day or so. And then down below here in news, I do follow some of the major news sources, including my local newspaper, the Washington Post, New York Times, local news, AP News. But you can see, given the news that we're facing day to day, these are at the bottom of my list of priorities. These are the things I am least likely to spend any significant time with. But I want them available. If I need to see the news, if I want to see the news, I can. This has replaced Facebook as my #1 source of information. The tech news category specifically is where I spend a lot of time finding out what's going on in my industry. I don't have to visit websites. I don't have to look at a feed that is organized by somebody else's idea of what's important or what I'm most likely to click on. It's simply organized by the sources of information I choose and the order in which those sources happen to publish their information. In the long run, it puts me in control of the information that I am going to consume every day. My goal here isn't to sell you on Feedly or even RSS. RSS is one of those incredibly powerful technologies that nobody really knows about. I will tell you that if you subscribe to a podcast on any platform, you're already using RSS because RSS is the technology that underlies how podcasts are delivered. RSS is about 20 plus years old. It was very exciting when it first came out. There were pundits who claimed it was the death of email. Well, that didn't happen. Tools like Feedly and technologies like RSS are, in my opinion, incredibly cool and incredibly powerful. The problem is, and the reason that they never really took off at the consumer level, is that they're also, as you can probably guess, somewhat complicated and somewhat difficult to set up and get your head around. Like I said, I'm not trying to convince you to switch to RSS or Feedly. They're great technologies, and if they are of interest to you, by all means, that's the approach that I recommend. However, what I really am trying to get across here is that now, more than ever, is a time that I think it's well worth revisiting and reviewing exactly how you're using social media, what sources of information you're consuming on social media, and whether that really is the right thing for you and your mental health. I know that I found myself at a position where the answer was no. I needed to make changes, and I did. For me, the clear winner was to switch to sources of information that allowed me to remain in control and get the information I care about without all that other stuff. Let me also add here that one of the other sources of information that I have started to rely on more and more is YouTube, of all things. It's different. The consumption style is very different. It's not the kind of a thing you can consume just everywhere, but the same thing applies. By curating a set of channels that I subscribe to and get notified of their new videos, I'm actually finding out more information, both tech and non-tech related, that are adding value to my life. I hope that Ask Leo is one of those sources of information for you. So if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Leave a comment, if you will, about what you're doing to maintain your sanity in the face of this flood of information coming at us from all these different directions and how it's being colored by social media. If you're not watching this on YouTube, askleo.com/YouTube is the Ask Leo YouTube channel that'll take you out there and you can subscribe right away. I try to publish multiple videos throughout the week helping you use technology more confidently and, to be honest, with a little less depression. For the original article that goes into this also in a little bit more depth, has updates, comments, and related links, visit askleo.com/126616. I'm Leo Notenboom. This is askleo.com. Thanks, as always, for watching. Take care.